Today we're doing how to get better grades, working to get you in the best college you can and leading to a successful professional life. The introduction in this is going to deal with a question, which is, what year in your life has statistically the biggest impact on your financial results in your life? Now, I asked the question, it's Socratic, because Socrates learned early that if you ask somebody a question, it makes them think. If you give them the answer, it just kind of brushes off them. So we'll ask you the question, which year in your financial life makes the biggest impact? I mean, what year? Well, most people think many things, but they don't think it's your junior year in high school. That turns out to be the most significant financial year in anyone's life. And why is that? Well, statistically, the key to somebody's financial life and happiness with their life relates to what college they get into or don't get into. And the difference between going to Harvard or going to Yale is $1.5 million in your lifetime. A lot of money. Now, that doesn't mean everybody going to Harvard is just interested in money or everybody in Yale is. It just means statistically that is correct. The other thing is that what do early plans mean? And Yale did a wonderful study in this and found out with its graduates that the ones that were most happy with their life are ones that had a written plan when they were in college. And that was about 10%. Another 10% had some ideas but not a plan, and the other 80% came in last. In other words, people who had a plan in their mind but hadn't written it down came behind the ones that did. Now, here was the interesting thing about happiness or money. It was defined by the people. In other words, the ones that had an early plan tended to be happier with their life. That may have involved money, it may have involved money a little bit, or it may not have involved money at all. So what we're going to talk to you today about is being practical. And for parents, what's interesting is kids always think they're cool and they know everything. But the big shocker in their life is when they find out that their junior year in high school is what's really going to determine how much money they make in their life. That's a sobering moment. It also allows you to point out that they're naive. Now, if you're one of the students and you don't know this, you're like me. I didn't fully realize this when I was in high school. But think about this. What if I'm right? If I'm right, you better pay attention. What if I'm wrong? It doesn't really matter. Doing well, going to college helps you. So this is a case where it should focus your mind on two things. One is, what you do in high school matters. And actually, it matters a lot more than what you do in college. And what you do in college turns out matters more than what you do in graduate school. Secondly, plans matter. If you sit down and out of this CD and audiobook, you decide to write down your plan, you're well ahead of others. Now, interestingly, and I want to go back to this, when people talked about their plans, it didn't mean they followed through on the plan. It meant they got into the habit of learning. And when you graduate from any institution, they call it commencement, which means the beginning, not the end. So the idea is that when you graduate, you're going into the beginning of the next step, the beginning of your life or whatever. And planning is a beginning step. It's a process. If you start planning early, you'll get better at planning late. And it really depends on when you start. I know that myself, I was very interested looking at some old textbooks I had from the 8th grade. I had written Harvard in the outside. That was my goal. I went to Harvard. Part of the reason I went to Harvard, I think, is not only it was my goal, but the teachers I had and my fellow students knew that. This was my objective. I was clear. If they talked about me, what was I going to do? That's what I wanted to do. So it's very important to do that. Now, when I went to my own plan, I wanted to be a lawyer because back when in the 60s, when I was into this stuff, that sounded good. When I got to college, I talked to my roommate, and he said, you really don't know anything about business, do you? And I said, well, I know a lot about business. He said, I think all you know is they smoke cigars and they put feet up in their desks. And I thought about it, and I said, yeah, you're right. So at the end of my senior year at Harvard, I went to take a course at Harvard Law School, and I was amazed because really all I knew is I knew about Clarence Darrow being a great defense lawyer, and I knew about Perry Mason. That's really all I knew. So when I actually found out what they did, I found it was awful. And one of the things the professor, Paul Freund, said, and it was for seniors in college, and he did this because he was as interested in getting people not to go to law school who didn't want to as he was in getting the right people to go. Well, it was a patent and trademark case in course, and I learned a ton. It was wonderful. It's helped me win patent and trademark cases on both sides of the fence ever since. But the thing I liked about it was it was a learning process. So I'd had this plan, and I changed the plan. I went to business school because I realized in the course that lawyers work for business people, and business people weren't as smart.